Three, two, one. Welcome to the Primal Show with today's guest, Veronica Culver from the enchantedcook.blogspot.com and Gary Collins from the Primal Power Method. I'm so glad to have you on today. And you've been a longtime Julian Bakery customer. That's kind of how I found you, and supporter of ours. And I really wanted to have you on. You've been sending us amazing Instagram photos of your little Julian Bakery meals. And I've seen you transition in the last months to a paleo way of eating. And I was like, I have to have this person on. I found out that, you happen to be 49 years of age. Excuse me for saying so, but I think you found the fountain of youth. And I wanted to find out what you were doing and kind of a little bit about your background and how you found paleo. If you can kind of walk us through maybe some of the different styles of eating and how your body felt, I would love to hear more.
Absolutely. So first of all, I've been a fan of Julian Bakery, like you said, for forever. And no matter which kind of way of eating I was enjoying and experimenting with and exploring, Julian Bakery has always had a place in that way of eating. So I love that about your solutions, your products.
Thank you.
But I've always been kind of like a really good eater. I mean, I love food. I'm a foodie. I've been a cook since I was literally a little kid, recipe developing, kind of the family chef, all of that my whole life. But 49 years is a long time. I've had a lot of time to try a lot of different things. So I actually started a food blog several years ago. My focus of my food blog then, when I started it, was really just about quality eating, finding that, really great ingredient and kind of expanding on it and making it into a really great dish and just having fun with it. And I'm a big photographer, and I like to photograph all my food that I eat, and as you know from my Instagram and all the things I like to do. And so that just kind of, made sense to do this food blog. And as time went on, I really just started, thinking, wow, maybe I should reconsider the things I'm eating, because I was sort of eating a lot of really good food, and by good food I meant, pastas and full fat, wonderful, these rich, great dishes, albeit with quality ingredients.
Sure.
But, probably not, I was eating desserts, all kinds of with regular sugar and things like that. So people would even ask me, do you eat everything you put on your blog? And I was like, yes, I do. I'm eating it as I'm putting it on there, but, age and, eating like that kind of catches up with you as a woman, especially. So I started to pack on a few pounds, and I was like, I really need to think about what I'm doing here and try to figure out how to get rid of this. But the last thing I wanted to change was the way I was eating.
Sure.
So, I started exercising more, doing other things. And then I started thinking, well, maybe I'll try vegetarian. Seems like a good way to go. Lots of good points to vegetarian. So I started, eating as a vegetarian. Then I was like, I should try, maybe go a little step further. Maybe I should try vegan. I even went raw for a little while. So I was like, this is, and I touted it the whole way. I was like, this, and then as luck would have it, I just was like, this isn't sustainable for me. Eating, I get it. I appreciate everything about each of these ways of eating for the folks who love eating those ways. But for me personally, I found that it wasn't sustainable for me. So eventually, and I wasn't losing the weight I wanted to lose.
So talk to us a little bit when you became a vegetarian, how did your body feel? You're saying you weren't losing weight and stuff like that. Did you have issues with like inflammation or anything like that? What were you struggling with, I guess, being a vegetarian?
I have to say the number one thing for me was finding good protein sources. So I was big on quinoa and things like that. And then from the perspective of health and, the way, those kinds of things go, it really wasn't about inflammation so much for me, or at least that I, recall or noticed at the moment. For me, it was more about the way I looked.
Sure.
And, maintaining or trying to lose weight for sure, but maintaining that energy level, and enjoying what I was eating, feeling satisfied, and that kind of, and not packing on more pounds.
Oh,
Well,
I
it's a
could
lot of
imagine.
work too.
Yeah.
Being a vegetarian or vegan, it's a lot of work, and I think that's one thing that people really don't get is that, yeah, I mean, will you be healthier than if you're eating the standard American diet? Of course.
Yes.
Because the standard American diet is basically nothing but poison. So,
Agreed.
anything is better than that. But the problem is everyone I've talked to, and I've actually had clients who are former vegans, my editor's a former vegan, and just the work. They tell me just all they did was plan their food all day long because you have to eat nonstop.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially if you're active because it's not calorie dense.
Well, and with quinoa and a lot of the vegetarian type meals, they're very high in carbs and sugar, both. And then you don't have a good source of protein, so you're probably not as full, as often as you should be. So, and how about your strength level?
Right, absolutely. So energy level, strength level, those kinds of things. In order to eat, the quantity that I would need to eat, or, the frequency, as you said, Gary, to be able to maintain my fitness level was very challenging.
And then how did you transition from vegetarian? You said you weren't getting the results that you wanted. What did you kind of try next? What was your next iteration?
So, vegetarian, then vegan, then raw. Then I started, raw. I went raw for a while. And then sort of just doing some, amalgamation, I guess, of all of these things together, and then adding protein sources back in.
Sure.
And none of these, by the way, lasted very long. I just kind of dipped my toe in and tried to become educated about it and did my best to survive, that way for myself personally again. But in the end, I really sort of went back to a blend of everything. And I say in the end, this is pre-paleo.
Okay.
So I did that. I was moving along just fine, thinking about the new direction that I was going to take my blog in. I think we kind of touched on that earlier. I had started my blog many years ago. Everything was going great, changed my way of eating several times. Each time thinking, I'm going to relaunch my blog with a vegan perspective. I'm going to relaunch, And then eventually I didn't relaunch my blog, and I still haven't relaunched it, but now I'm ready. That's awesome. 100% committed and ready to relaunch it completely with a complete overhaul. And I'm sorry, I've kind of lost where I was heading.
It's okay. It's okay. Well, one thing that you brought up earlier was, and something that you might have done along the way. Did you ever find a body bug or a way to figure out how many calories you were consuming, how many calories your metabolism was burning? Because you touched a little bit on full fat and how it's probably like myself, if I consume more calories than my metabolism's burning, I find myself gaining weight, regardless if I'm paleo or not. I think the rules of calories still apply. Sure, fat doesn't make you fat, but fat is 9 times the calories, as we all know. And did you ever, buy anything to figure out how many calories you're doing, or did you kind of just do it by the scale?
I counted calories big time. Sure. I counted, I've always kind of looked at the breakdown of nutrition and, every single label. I'm a big label fanatic. Sure. But to answer your question, the only thing I can say to that really, no, I never found the perfect thing for me. I think I'm just not, as good at that kind of thing or as educated as that kind of thing as I'd like to be.
Sure.
But I can tell you that what has happened is since I switched to the paleo way of eating, which has been about 3-4 months ago, that I no longer really think about those things. Yeah. I spent a lifetime really thinking about those things. And today the things I think about are less about that and more about what are the ingredients in each item, the ingredients, not necessarily the breakdowns, barring, sugar or, crazy carbs or something like that. That's kind of out of whack in my mind.
Right.
But what I look for are, what are the very few real food ingredients that are in this item that I'm going to purchase, or this dish that I'm going to make. And that's really what I focus on.
I think that's well said because, obviously we all strive to eat real food all the time,
Yeah.
but it's just not realistic. And to be honest with you, I'd like to have a paleo brownie, but without all the sugar. And that's exactly, the types of things I try to create. But when I formulate products, I always try to find unprocessed ingredients, and basically all we're doing is mixing them together. And a lot of our products are really no more processed than you cooking an egg in a pan. I mean, that's at the end of the day. And that's really what you want to strive for is minimally processed ingredients.
100%.
And I think she hit on something really key too, far as the transition to paleo. And this is something that gets lost, and actually I should make 2 points. We always hear that fat doesn't make you fat. I think I'm going to start getting away from that statement because fat will make you fat. If you overconsume fat, that's its natural thing, is to put on that fat in the form of fat.
Sure.
Think of people in polar regions, they're going to have more fat content usually because they need the insulation. They're trying to store fat. Their metabolisms will slow down during periods of, where the weather's really bad, they can't move around as much. It depends. I've seen actually really ripped people in the polar regions too who eat a ton of fat. But I think, that's a tricky statement. But it's totally true that what paleo does is it cuts the hard work out, is what I tell people. You don't have to think about it anymore. If you eat a paleo diet, the right paleo diet, and I'm not talking about these hacks on the internet who tell you to eat, a gallon of, maple syrup and then 4 sticks of butter, and that's totally okay.
Get started.
Even though butter's not paleo, but a lot of them don't even know that.
Yeah.
But and that it simplifies your diet is you don't think about it anymore. You get to have time to do other stuff. That's what I tell people. My food is important, very important to me, but the time I spend on it is far less than I used to.
Yeah.
Because everything I have is healthy. I just cook it and eat it. I don't have to read the label. I don't have to figure it out. I don't have to count calories.
Yep.
I just eat, exercise, move, live a healthy lifestyle, get enough sleep.
It's very simple. And
it's very basic.
It's so crazy. My family always text messages me. They're like, Heath, what do you think about this way of eating? And I'm like, it's real simple, at least for myself. 40% meats, fish, chicken, 40% veggies, 10% nuts, 10% fruit. Yeah. I mean, how simple is that? Yeah. And if you are looking at some sort of paleo type of food, it should be broken down like that. It's lean fat, not an overabundance of fat, and it would just be whatever is naturally occurring in the products. We don't have to overdo it, and so many people are overdoing it. And what they're doing is they're substituting fat in place of the sugar.
Right.
And so it just doesn't make any sense anymore. And why overdo it? And that's why so many people reach out to Gary and I all the time. They're like, hey, I'm not losing weight going paleo. and it's like you look at their diet and it's like, 50, 60% fat. And it's like, oh, man, this is crazy. You can still be in a ketogenic fat burning mode without overdoing the fat. You really can. You just have to minimize the sugar. Your body will naturally start burning fat as energy, and you're going to feel great. You're going to have this sustained energy all day long.
Well, it's a misinterpretation of ketogenic is the biggest problem right now. That's a lot. I don't know if you've seen this, Veronica, in your exploration of different diets. I don't know if you ever tried the low-carb, high-fat diet. Or ketogenic diet, that's what it's called. Well, there's a lot of amateurs in it who don't know anything about anything, and they're overweight. They've been doing it for 10 years. They're still overweight. And I'm not talking 5 pounds. I'm talking 50, 100 pounds. And what it is that they don't get it because when you look at that and you're mimicking starvation by consuming too much fat. Yeah. If your body only sees fat and can only process fat as energy, because we have 3 energy systems that are moving all the time, moving around, and probably more than that we know of. Those are just the main 3 we know of. Is that because the way we process carbohydrates, protein, and fats. Well, if your body sees fat, you keep eating fat, it's just trying to burn fat all the time. Eventually it goes, I must be starving because all I'm seeing is fat. That means I don't have enough protein in my diet and I'm not getting enough of healthy carbohydrates in the form of vegetables, nuts, seeds, or, some fruit. So your body will react to that and it'll all of a sudden slow its metabolism down. And I've seen it not only in the research, but working with people and talking with other people who work with people. It's a 2-week window. That's about what you get out of a ketogenic diet.
Wow.
So after those 2 weeks, your metabolism starts to correct and slow down. Yeah. So that's just now it's gone the whole wacky end of the spectrum. They're throwing in all this fat and they go, well, that's we're trying to mimic what and it's like, no, 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 no. I grew up hunting and fishing. So did Heath.
Yep.
You cut open an animal. A healthy animal doesn't have a ton of fat. Some have more than others, depending regionally. But it's, again, just using your head.
I was just
common sense.
The whole time I was thinking exactly those words, use your head. Everybody just needs to apply really their own, kind of common sense to it. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. I'm not going to say that's always the case, but generally in cases where, and I'll use, when I started following the paleo way of eating, and I would follow different people's Instagram accounts and different things like that, and I would look at what they were promoting and posting, and there were a lot of like desserts and breads and all of these things that looked very alluring.
Yeah.
And it sort of gave the impression that, oh my gosh, you can eat this paleo way of eating and still eat a sandwich for every meal, or still eat dessert every day, or pancakes for breakfast every day, or things like that. Things that
wrap figs and stuff like that. Three figs have something like 22 grams of sugar.
Right.
And then you eat a whole plate of bacon wrapped figs, and you've just eaten 100, 150 grams of sugar, and of course and then you just combined it with a bunch of fat.
Right.
Well, fat and sugar do not work well together when they're overconsumed. They have the opposite effect.
Right.
And it's amazing that people, use your head, put a stick of butter in your coffee. Hey, it tastes good. It's phenomenal. But in your mind, is it healthy? Absolutely not.
Yeah, so always use your head. Just go back to the noggin, because that's where, you won't, take too big a turn.
And that's what me and Heath try and teach. And that's in all my writings in my books, is I just say, you know what, don't overcomplicate it. It's simple. The last thing you need to be doing half your life is focusing on food and exercise. Just use common sense. It'll all blend together. But the problem is getting to that point. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that, as the confusion. I mean, someone new to paleo.
I was very confused.
Yeah, very confused. And on the exercise side, too, because it's this very good balance.
Yeah.
And it moves. Your diet moves upon exercise. Exercise moves upon diet. They're moving around all the time. If you don't adjust one or the other, it never works correctly. So you could have an exercise program where you work exactly the same amount every day, and then your diet's going to change. Your diet can never stay exactly the same. Well, and if you don't adjust the exercise to that diet, well, then you're off, and it goes both ways. I think that's a big part people don't understand either, is it has to move. It's a moving target.
Well, I agree. And I think sometimes that in and of itself can be complicated as well, or it can seem complicated. And for me, it certainly felt complicated until, and I kid you not, until I started really eating the paleo way. Eating the paleo way automatically simplified my life. It simplified everything about all the things you just talked about. For me, they just sort of happen now. And one of the things, I've heard this my whole life, just listen to your body will tell you. Well, my body wasn't telling me anything, really. I mean, I couldn't hear it. I could see that, I would like to lose 10 pounds or, whatever. But, I've always been in good general health and been very active and, like I said, a very good eater. And I just kind of thought, well, this is how it is. I'm going to try to lose that 10 pounds or that 5 pounds or whatever. But, my body was never telling me what to do, or my head wasn't hearing it until now. And so the paleo way of eating, I honestly, I don't know how, but it just reset everything. And now I will say this, when I transitioned to paleo, I did an elimination diet for 6 weeks. I did it for 6 weeks.
Yeah, that's supposed to do.
Yeah, and I did an elimination diet for 6 weeks. And my whole goal during that time was to kind of reset the body, figure out what things maybe my body doesn't really like, that I just sort of that silent inflammation thing, right?
Yeah.
And then just learn, really, my whole goal was just like losing those few pounds and keeping them off comfortably. When I came off of the elimination diet, I was like, all right, so I'm going to add one thing back in every few days, see how it impacts me. And I was thinking about, what, in the meantime, while I'm adding these one things back in, what am I going to be eating? What makes sense? I'd done a lot of research, and the paleo way of eating kept coming up. And I was like, this just makes sense. It made logical sense to me. So I was listening to my head for a change. Made logical sense. I read a lot about grains and how they might be impacting my system from a weight perspective and a silent inflammation perspective and those kinds of things, dairy, all of that. So as I started to just think about adding these one or two things back in, and I started having reactions, it was bizarre to me. And for the very first time, my body really was telling me, and I was able to hear it. It was telling me very clearly, you really shouldn't eat these grains, because this is going to sound hokey, but I'm 1,000% true. To this day now, and this happened to me just a couple nights ago, went to a restaurant, said I wanted, gluten-free. I didn't order anything with grains in it. Said I wanted, gluten-free, blah, blah, blah. One of the dishes that came out looked perfectly normal, but it had a little sauce on it. It was like a lemon butter sauce. Later that night, I started getting like a stomach ache. I was like, it's kind of weird. Didn't connect the dots. The next morning, I woke up in a bad mood. I was like, I should be like, top of the world. It's the holidays. Feel great. And I was crabby. And I started thinking about it. I was like, oh my gosh, I think I got gluten,
Yeah.
And sure enough, the sauce had.
It's so common. Like even when I go out to have steak, like sometimes the blackening or the seasoning will have gluten in it. It's like, it's crazy. You really have to kind of go above and beyond and ask, or have them ask. But it's literally in everything, that and soy too. So.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, they don't know though. I mean, you go to any restaurant and none of the cooks or people who work there understand gluten. It's not necessarily.
It's getting better though.
It's getting better, but it's not their fault. I mean, the food industry's tough, and you're just trying to serve food. I mean, they're not, they're not biochemists or anything. But that's very true, and you become super sensitive.
Yeah, my body told me once I adjusted, once I got everything out of my system, it just tells me instantly when I've done something it doesn't like, and it really, in 49 years, this is the first time I've ever been able to say my body tells me what it needs, and it just works, and it's easy. It's truly easy.
Well, and it changes too. We were talking to a guy named Bill Courtright about that, and he's a great, phenomenal guy. He's done a ton of research, and it's again, everyone wants the easy way. They just want you to give them the specific diet, specific exercise plan, repeat. And I tell them it doesn't work that way. And as I'm aging, I'm in my mid 40s, and it's catching up to me too. I notice things are changing. Recently I all of a sudden discovered I have an intolerance to eggs that I never had my entire life.
Right.
And all of a sudden now I have this weird intolerance. I don't know where it came from. I don't know why.
Body's
so I have to be really careful with eggs. I can't eat them all the time like I used to. I love eggs. I mean, I love eggs. They don't love me anymore. And that's just the way it is. So now I have to adapt to that, and I have to be careful with eggs. Would I tell someone else though, oh, don't eat eggs because they bother me? No, go eat it. They're great. Eggs are phenomenal. They just happen to bug me now.
Yeah.
And maybe it will change later on. Maybe a year from now I'll be able to eat them again. Who knows what changed in my body? I don't know.
But the beauty of it is your body told you.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about what's coming down or what it'll tell you.
Yep.
I think something Gary and I have really been learning recently is we've been looking at bodybuilders, and both men and women, and what they eat when they always do the same thing. They bulk up. And what do they bulk up on? They bulk up on a lot of fat and a lot of grains. Mm-hmm. And when they want to cut and get lean and shredded, they actually adjust their calorie count. What do they take out? They take out the fat. Mm-hmm. And what they're doing is they're all of a sudden, their metabolisms used to burn all these calories, and then they drop their calorie count far below what their metabolism is burning. And guess what it does? It eats away all the fat, and what does it leave? Lean muscle. Yeah. So the takeaway from that, and that works for men and women, and it's proven, and it's been done forever and ever. So one of the things I started playing around with, because my personal goal was to have a six-pack, is to take the paleo diet, which met all my, I don't have any allergies anymore now that I'm paleo, but I've taken the paleo diet and I've played with the fat levels, which obviously plays with the calories. And when I want to get lean, if I'm going to do like a photo shoot for, like I did one for our paleo protein powder line coming out, what did I do? I adjusted the fat, and sure enough, I got really lean. And I was already, skinny and whatever, but if I wanted to get lean and shredded, all I did was play with the fat number, which is really just calories, and voila. And so, and if, let's say I go on vacation and I gain 5 or 10 extra pounds, I come back, I adjust the fat, and sure enough, it just falls right off of me every single time. And usually the last 5 or 10 pounds is the hardest.
Absolutely.
But now it's super easy, and it happens very, very fast. And it's so, losing weight and maintaining that look it's so easy now.
Well, with bodybuilders too, one of the things that they've gotten away from is they used to do in the off season, they would blow up. They would just eat everything, and then they would thin down. Now they're staying lean throughout the whole season, and then they fine-tune before competitions.
Yes.
And because there's a very small window on that too. I mean, you can eliminate all the fat and drop your calories, but again, your body will go into starvation mode and your metabolism will slow down. So these guys are like scientists. I mean, they know exactly. And even they get it wrong. You'll see them guys go, I finished third. I got – something happened. I did exactly the same thing I did last time, but I retained some more water, and I don't know why. Because, again, it's a moving target. These guys live this every second of their life, and even they get it wrong.
Yeah.
So, but they adapt, and that's a good point that Heath, we're big fans of bodybuilding. We just are. We grew up that way. Me and him have the same.
But lean, the guys that are really lean, not the like gigantic guys.
Yeah, I'm not talking about massive.
Obviously, it's a lot of work either way, but I think it's there requires a lot more dedication on the women and the men that are lean, like the bikini models and stuff like that. They've really dialed in their diets, and a lot of them have started following paleo. Now, before the show, we talked a little bit about you getting into running, and how has your macros changed? Have you adjusted your paleo diet at all to basically give you more energy through like a longer sort of run?
Yeah, so I'm actually still kind of experimenting with, what kind of starchy, carbs, or if I need to, or how much of it if I do, if before, after, whatever. I'm still experimenting a little bit with that. My sort of starchy carb of choice right now, because I am a runner, is potatoes. And so I will generally, and I'm not a sweet potato fan. I know like paleo people are going to but I'm not a sweet potato fan. So I go with, like Yukon Golds, and I go with the organic, version. But I generally try to, if I know I'm going to have a race coming up, or if I'm going to do a particularly long run, kind of the day or two before, I'll start having potatoes, maybe with one meal. Maybe the day before I might have it with 2 meals. Generally speaking, I try to avoid, really starchy carbs, just because for my body, I've found that's what works.
Sure.
But I have plenty of energy for my long runs. I have, plenty of energy for, to push myself hard in a race. The thing that I probably, switching to paleo, the thing that made the biggest difference for me is in my running. And definitely in the performance and endurance arena, but more so in, and I'll touch on this sort of, touchy subject, but of the, issues that runners often have, and often female runners have. That, runner's trots thing, to be just frank. I literally was having an issue with that on almost every training run, certainly in a race condition. It was getting bad. And when I looked back, I had started adding like a carby meal the night before, and by carby meal, it was like pasta or, something like that. And the second I cut that stuff out, all those grains out, there was a little adjustment period of trying to figure out what do I need to supplement back in with to maintain my, maybe a little more fat, maybe, whatever it is, a starchy carb. But I started reading up on, just paleo athlete books and things like that, and how do they do it. And my body adjusted, and I have literally zero, I'm going on record, zero issues with that anymore.
Well, the reason why is because I don't know if you did the goos and the gels.
A little.
Well, those are highly inflammatory in their nature because they're full of sugar. And when you start ingesting a lot of sugar like that, it actually will inflame your digestive tract as well. Then you throw in the grains on top of it.
Oh, the grains were a nightmare.
Well, the sugar is feeding the candida.
Candida, yes.
Which is really the main issue probably surrounding that. And but also, going paleo, you're also eliminating the inflammation just in all your joints, so it makes more sense. Something that Gary and I have been playing around with, because we started getting into running a lot more recently, is I personally like kind of like yourself, is I'll have some starchy carbs, sweet potatoes, maybe like one day before, like on a Sunday, and then on Monday I really go low carb, but I have my sweet potato after in that anabolic window of 15, 30 minutes right afterwards, but I always mix it with a good dose of protein too.
Right.
And it's never really more than like maybe 20 grams or so. I actually have a sweet potato powder that has protein in it, and I have that right after my workout, and it's awesome. I feel so energized, and that actually carries me through the whole week. I'll just do that when I need more energy, and so I don't actually have to front load anymore. I'm having it right after, and it's definitely helped kind of give me that lean, like hardened look. It's kind of cool. I think if you do a little research on the anabolic window, it's very interesting.
I know. I'm still studying it. It's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
It's great to kind of experiment on yourself and be able to see the results, of your efforts so quickly. And it's the paleo way of eating. Trust me, I mean, I've experienced it because I've tried a lot of things over the many years, and nothing has ever been so evident or so clear or so obvious to me as now, as when I make a change, it makes a dramatic difference instantly almost.
And it moves and it keeps going. You're probably at the point where you've gotten over the hump.
Yes.
It's always that 3-4 month window where you feel really good, but you're still adjusting. I tell people it takes about 12 to 18 months for everything to kind of settle in. And how about your allergies? Have you noticed, did you ever have seasonal allergies before and things like that?
Yeah.
And asthma?
There's still, I have had seasonal allergies. I take Singular for that. I've tried to in an effort to just be like, get rid of everything. So tried not taking the Singular. Hasn't quite helped yet enough, but I think in time it just takes time for it.
Well, I have good experience with that.
Really new.
Yeah, well, I have good experience with that because I had really, really debilitating allergies.
Oh.
I had allergy shots growing up for like 7 years. I would get, my eyes would swell up. Literally part of the year I would be just done. I was worthless. I was tired, cranky, just taking allergy pills all the time, and it got really bad in my late 30s, right around the time when I found kind of the paleo primal way of eating. And I'll tell you, it takes about 3 years is what I noticed, and now literally I have no seasonal allergies, none. And I mean, I'm talking horrific. People would see me, nose running and just miserable.
Yeah.
And now I don't even know the seasons change. I don't even have a clue. I used to dread spring and summer because I knew I was just going to be awful. Now, nothing. I haven't taken an allergy pill in years.
Oh.
I mean, even cats. I used to be.
Yeah, I'm allergic to cats.
Horribly allergic to cats. I'm still allergic to them to a point.
Yeah.
But I can pet them, and I just wash my hands before. If I got any in a room near, my eyes would swell up within 5 minutes immediately, and I'd start wheezing, and I go, I gotta go, and it would affect me for like 2 or 3 days. So I like that. That's why I wanted to ask, because I think that's probably one of the biggest health ailments people are suffering from today is allergies.
And that we think it's just life, it's just how it is. I was born this way, or whatever.
And
but it's not how it has to be. And you could apply that philosophy, that way of thinking, across everything.
Well, I'm a weird thinker. I remember at one point when my allergies were really bad, I would go into this zone. I go, all right, what would a caveman or what would cowboys do in the Old West? They couldn't go around riding their horse in the desert, sneezing and with allergies all the time. I went, if you're a caveman, you're sneezing and you're in a cave, well, then something's going to find you and eat you. None of this makes sense. The allergy thing never made sense to me. Why do we have this? I don't get it, And it finally sunk in one day that I go, oh, it's because of my diet, stupid. And, you can't eliminate all of them. Yeah, you can't eliminate all of them. I tell people that. Yeah. But I'll tell you what, I'm a living testament of someone who had some of the worst allergies of anyone I ever knew, and mine went away. Literally went away. That's amazing in itself. But it takes, like I said, I noticed seasonally, like each season would get better.
Yeah.
I did like you. I kept having to take allergy pills, but what I would do is I wouldn't have to take them every day. You know, when it was bad or the pollen was really high, I'd have to take one. Then I wouldn't have to take one for a couple days. Then I could, you know, and it just got better and better. And then the next year, you know, I only took it when it was really bad. I didn't have to take them very often. Then the next year, I found that I didn't have to take them at all. And
Good.
then I haven't
That's
taken
my
them.
plan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about you have a daughter, and obviously you're a true testament to the paleo diet because you've also started talking to your daughter about paleo. Can you kind of tell us how that initially went and maybe what she's experienced in her life?
Absolutely. So she's 23. So she's at that age where she still eats like she's still in college, or was before up until recently, eating that way. Her whole life, she's been a big, kind of carb fanatic. McDonald's, Wendy's, you name it, fast food. After she became of age, she started drinking, never before, things like that. So all of those things were impacting her system. But, when you're a young person and you're just going about life as you know it as a young person, you don't think that what you're eating and drinking is having any kind of dramatic impact on your body. She has had digestive issues since she was a small child, but none of us really could ever figure it out. Like, I would take her to specialists and she would describe her symptoms, and they would do these tests and they could never quite put a finger on, what's wrong. And it started like, oh, my stomach feels funny, when she was really little. But it progressed to where, as a young adult, emergency room visits, like 12 in a year, where something would upset her system to the point where she would start throwing up and couldn't stop, and it would tear up, her insides. So several emergency room visits, more specialists, more checking, more everything, more medications. Everybody's just trying to throw medication. They removed her gallbladder.
Oh, no.
In one of these series of tests, because they kept trying everything, and I could name the list of medical tests and procedures that were done, but I won't bore you with it. But they kept trying things, and like nothing they couldn't find, because she didn't have a disease yet. She didn't have celiac yet. She didn't have colitis yet. She didn't have any of these things yet. So the traditional, Western medicine, they're like, well, let's just give her this, let's just give her that, and, send her on her way. And it all sort of came to a head where she spent almost a week in the hospital just recently. And I was kind of on my new paleo journey. So over the years, I've tried to investigate and learn and research ways to help her. And then it sort of clicked. I was like, wow, this sort of paleo way of eating, they talk about all these things that it makes better. She's got all these things, that they talk about with her. Literally, it was that kind of, connecting the dots. And I said, I think we need to, change the way you're eating, and she wasn't that receptive to it, but she was kind of at her wit's end. And then we found a functional medicine doctor who was also an MD, but a functional medicine. I had been doing some research and stumbled across a more well-known one, and realized there's this whole, functional and integrative medicine approach to health that is really goes hand in hand with paleo. And so we started seeing that doctor, and just long story short, I know it's too late for that, but long story short, she's made a dramatic recovery. She's still on the road to recovery, but for the first time in as long as she can remember, and she's 23, like I said, she can wake up in the morning without feeling so nauseated that she can't get out of bed. She can go about her day with energy, without feeling like, she needs to stop and lay down and like try not to throw up. I don't think most of us can understand what that feels like. It's not a fun, way to be. But since she changed her way of eating, she's also taking certain supplements because they ran a lot of tests and a lot of her, nutrition was lacking. I mean, obviously all of the grains and carbs she was consuming were just kind of sabotaging. Any little bit of nutrition she was getting was just getting completely sabotaged. So completely malnourished. But now, supplementing with certain supplements that are helping her in that arena, eating the paleo way for the most part, dramatic difference. I mean, she's a new girl.
Well, and now she has to pay attention. This is a good example of she doesn't have a gallbladder anymore.
Right.
So she has to eat a lean fat diet. She cannot eat a fatty. She can eat fat, but obviously, do they have her on the bovine bile salts supplement?
She takes a digestive enzyme that has that ox bile in it.
Yeah.
Now it's a newer thing that she started doing. I take those as well, one before every meal, but just to help with that. But yeah, she started taking those.
Yeah, it's sad that I've ran into this with many clients actually. They've had their gallbladder taken out for absolutely no reason. And actually I had one client who had a pretty large portion of her large intestine taken out.
Wow.
Or gallbladder. I mean, I felt so bad for her, and she was in her early 20s. And her problem was, again, it was diet. And we got her on the right path, and she felt a lot better. But by that point, she had so many, impairments because she was missing parts,
right.
Of digestion that it was very difficult. But she did a lot better. Hopefully she's young enough that she should be able to adapt to not having a gallbladder. But her diet will have to be even that much more on point.
I agree. And that's the thing, if we're going to give a message to any young person who would be listening, it is what you eat. It absolutely is what you eat. And, we didn't really talk about GMOs or anything like that, but that's another huge, huge impact on our youth today. Is the prevalence of GMOs and, pesticides and all of those things that GMOs represent in our standard American diets. And that's all they've been consuming for their entire lives, more than likely. No wonder why they're all sick.
Well, it's not only that, but it's that generation I've talked about as far as the gene expression and how it takes about 3 to 4 generations for it to truly kick in. And her generation is basically the generation that will be the most broken that can still actually function. The generation after her, if they don't get it fixed, basically will be in the hospital nonstop.
And that will be the last generation or one after, because then sterility and things like that start to set in based on the tests and things that the studies that I've seen and read.
It's already kicking in. That's why fertility clinics are so big right now.
Yep.
And for her generation, it's going to be even worse because that's the first thing your body shuts down is reproduction. Because reproduction is the only thing that you do not need to survive. It's like the first thing your body's going to go after. Do you need it to reproduce? Yes. But do you need it to survive? No.
Yeah.
So that's what your body goes after. And obviously with all the dysfunction of hormones, that it makes it even worse. But yeah, that's a really good story. I'm glad you could share that with us because I think right now it's incredibly prevalent with her generation.
I agree.
They're so sick and they don't know what to do. They don't know.
Yeah, it's frightening, really.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you. We want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I think a lot of people will really, learn a lot out of this episode. We will definitely put this all over the internet, and I think from hearing your story, I think a lot of people can relate to. I hopefully will compel a lot of people to come over to this way of eating. You're a true testimony to the paleo diet. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And go ahead and give everybody your Instagram handle.
Sure.
What is it?
On Instagram, you can find me at Veronica Culver, CULVERNPD, like Newport Beach. No. What? NPB. God.
There we go. It's okay. And we'll post all the links in the description area for your website and for Instagram.
Fantastic.
And thank you so much for
coming.
Thank
you.
Appreciate it. Bye.